because I was a nervous wreck at that time. And so I went home, and that was how I got involved in it. The fellow who was testifying, it was about ethylene diamine tetracetic acid, a preservative, on gloves, and what he was saying was malarkey, but it was not only malarkey, it was he hadn't done the research of the guys down at Quantico, and they were angry that he was upstaging them and taking credit for work that he didn't do. And Judge Ito was right. That jury was exhausted, and what I had to tell them wasn't going to add anything to the picture. But what it did do was put me all over the national television. And I didn't ask for it. I came home from O.J. Simpson. FBI agents don't talk to the press. You do not talk to the media. You don't talk to Russians or communists or folks like that either. You're okay, but you don't talk to the media. And I was called into my boss's boss office one day, very shortly after that, and he said, ABC News wants to talk to you. And I said, well, I'm not talking to them. And he said, they want to talk to you. And management says you got to talk to them. Okay. Okay, well, you ordered me. I'll go talk to them then. But that was the O.J. Simpson thing.
But specifically, it was that the prosecution witness testified that chemical was found in laundry detergent and all kinds of stuff like that, right? Was that it?
However the testimony went, finding it was not relevant. The amount that was present was relevant. And the fact that he had done the research was not, that was what was angering the people at Quantico. They did the research. It was their work, and he picked it up, carried it downtown, did a few, puffs of smoke in the air, and then said, well, this is what I've shown. And those people, if you think a man is committing perjury and you're in the FBI, you're required to say something. But they knew what was going to happen to them because the FBI has a set of rules that are totally, completely irrelevant next to the main rule. And the main rule is, thou shalt not embarrass the FBI. And I heard that again and again and again and again in the FBI. National security is not as important as embarrassing the FBI. Death penalty sentences and executions are not as important as embarrassing the FBI. Nothing in the world is important as embarrassing the FBI, period. That was just, and so they couldn't very well. Everybody knows it. There's not a book there that says that, because then it would get under Freedom of Information Act, somebody get it. But that's so foolish that, we can't learn as a nation from our mistakes. The FBI is not a nation in and unto itself. It's a servant of the people. Whether they call themselves the seat of all government or not, they are a servant of the people. They're paid by the people, and we should know when they're making mistakes. That we should be able to, as a people, correct them. But no, anyhow, those boys couldn't reveal what was going on. Well, I could, because I had orders, like everybody else did. Anyhow, that's my O.J. Simpson story.
Well, knowing what you know, we have a lot in common, both State of Bellagio. La Bellage, it's called. La Bellage on Sunset Strip. It's right across the street from Whiskey A Go-Go. Did you hit the Whiskey A Go-Go or any of those places, the Rainbow? Probably not, right?
No.
Okay, yeah, those are like heavy metal places back in those days. But now, knowing what you know about the O.J. case, though, and about that chemical and the quantity of that chemical in the blood sample, do you think that blood was planted?
I don't know that. What I know about the O.J. Simpson trial was that guilt would be decided by people who were lied to by, 4 or 5 law enforcement officers.
Gotcha.
And you cannot determine guilt when you cannot trust the information coming to you. I went into a courtroom one time and I told the judge, Your Honor, in order to have an assault, somebody's got to assault somebody. In order to prove an assault, you've got to have one credible witness at least. We've had 4 credible witnesses, including my client, and none of them have any credibility at all, period. And therefore, you can't prove assault. And that judge looked at me and said, you're right. You're right, Mr. Whitehurst. I don't find guilt here. So that's... Hey, those people on that jury did exactly what they felt they should do.
Yeah.
We're not going to follow people that we know are lying.
Very good. I tell you, if I ever get into trouble in North Carolina, you're the man I'm coming to.
No, I'm a really bad attorney. I'm no good at it.
Yeah, I think I could trust you, though. There's a lot of stuff about you I like, I've read. Now, I guess the TWA 800, was that one of your cases? I
know about TWA 800. In fact, there's a film out there by Christina Borgeson that's about the TWA 800. It's a phenomenal. I'm trying to find the title of it. It's a phenomenal documentary, and they just went out and interviewed a whole bunch of people. I was not. By that time, they didn't want me out of the building, so I didn't go there. But I was hearing the ramifications of what was happening at the crime scene. People were furious that the fixers out there were trying to fix things and screwing the crime scene up.
Yeah, my ex-partner was NYPD Harbor Aviation. And all those guys in NYPD Harbor Aviation, they were all at my wedding. I was at their wedding. You know, I know all these guys. And the story that I heard was that it had to be a missile, and that it probably came from a naval National Guard, naval National Guard ship. What do you hear?
Well, what I hear is what I heard from the people that were putting together Christina Borgeson's documentary, that some over 200 people saw a missile, and a helicopter pilot 2 miles away, who had been a Vietnam helicopter pilot in the air, saw a missile, and that's what I hear. But you know, I wasn't there. I know that the issues that they had on the ground were they had to deal with a special agent in charge or a deputy assistant director or whatever who had his opinion about what it was and needed his opinion to be what it had to be. And some of the scientists were telling him, well, there's problems with what you're saying here. And when I know that in being part of that film, I was interviewed for it, and I watched the research of the TWA 800 film. I know that they interviewed those people, and finally the government's position was something to the effect of mass hysteria or something. If you get 250 people and see a missile, and then you don't want there to be a missile, well, I guess what you do is, it's like we hear those stories in the Soviet Union where the boss is coming through and all the trees are dead, so you get green paint, and for miles and miles on the side of the road, you paint the trees, okay? If you don't want missiles, then you say, well, everybody that saw that, somehow or another, at that point they saw it, had a psychiatric break or something like that. And you know that because why? And if it was, if they were missiles, if whatever it was that did that, if it was a government mistake, it'll come out, but it'll come out long after you and I pass away.
Yeah, I agree with you, because these guys are all afraid to talk, too.
Well,
you were telling me before we came on the air that you keep a piece of molten steel from the Waco compound, where these people and these children and these families were all burned alive. Can you tell us about your involvement in that case and what your conclusions are?
I was on the way back from the World Trade Center bombing, the one that happened in the early 90s, when we got a word, my partner and I, to drive on past. We dropped the vehicle that we were in and drive on out to Waco, and as we got closer to D.C., they said, belay that, we got some other people going out. I wasn't at Waco. I know a few years later that I was hired in 1980, 1998, 99, 2000, whatever, to go and reinvestigate bring a crew in and reinvestigate. I was hired by Rick Van Vliet out of Fort Collins, Colorado, and they put out the film Waco: A New Revelation. And I went out to the area looking for evidence. I went into the evidence locker in, I think, Austin, Texas. We looked at every piece of evidence there. We were there with the Texas Rangers took us in. We filmed a lot of that. And I think, I think I probably stand where most of the nation stand. There was a mature way to handle that, and the way it was handled was wrong. And I talked to people that were the Branch Davidians, and I'm not either sympathetic or unsympathetic to who and what they were, but if they were going after that David, what was his name?
Koresh. Koresh.
David Koresh. If they were going after him, they could have got him while he was jogging down the road. They could have got him when he was at the hardware store in town. They could have, picked him up. I understand that, a 50 cal round went through a government helicopter, so it wasn't like they were sitting underneath there not doing anything about what they perceived to be an attack. But, when I was at the site the site was closed. I mean, it was, the Branch Davidians invited us in. But I picked up a piece of molten metal at the site where the bunker itself burned up, and why there was a hole blown in the top of it, I don't know that. It looked like something a shape charge would put in it, but those people should have been safe in that bunker, and they were just burned alive. And I think telling that story, if you go to, Google Waco: A New Revelation, that pretty much says that's the information that was gathered, that we were able to gather.
Gotcha. And what kind of work did you do on the first World Trade Center bombing? I think it was 93, right? Or 90? Yeah, 93.
Yeah, I was in law school at the time, and I was in my first year of law school, and I was printing out an appellate brief, a practice appellate brief, when the security came in and they said, you're wanted at FBI headquarters. And we got back to headquarters, and somebody said they thought a transformer might have blown, but they need us up there in case it was a terrorist attack. So me and my partner drove a whole bunch of equipment up to the site, set up a laboratory in the New York City Police Department Academy, built a whole crime lab, brought in vendors with their equipment, spent $250,000 on different equipment, brought it in, set it up. We went into the scene inside was surreal. There were cars, alarms going off. There were fires here and there. There were chunks of concrete just falling. In fact, we went into a room where 45 minutes after we walked out, the whole ceiling just went. And if we'd have been in there when it went, they wouldn't have found us, or they'd have just mashed us flat. But we collected evidence trying to find out what type of explosive had gone off. And we collected evidence in other places, and to see what was it that set it off, why had it set off. And we were there for 10, 22-hour days. And at the end of it, the evidence that we had collected, some of it was nitroglycerin, and the nitroglycerin has a very high vapor pressure. It gets in the air and it contaminates all your evidence. We had to shut the lab down and go home. But it was a matter of go up and stay awake as long as you could, keep equipment going as long as you could, analyze as much as you could. And we had a phenomenal crew from the FBI there in that lab. When you're awake for 10 days and you're getting 2-3 hours sleep a night, and when we had to shut the lab down, everyone was they were fried. They were upset. Tears in people's eyes. We need to keep going. We need to keep going. We need to keep going. Well, Yeah, the problem was we couldn't because all our equipment was contaminated by that time.
We better take a commercial break, but when I get back, I have a couple more questions for you about the World Trade Center, the first World Trade Center bombing.